The sky was not supposed to bleed, not like this. Not with so many eyes watching from the darkness beyond. Across the surface of Earth, crimson streaks carved silent trails as alien ships broke the atmosphere, their hulls glowing with kinetic friction and menace. Great obelisks of alien alloy descended like tombstones, carried on repulsor fields, surrounded by storm clouds that hadn't existed seconds ago. The world's children looked up and asked questions. Their parents didn't have answers. They only knew one thing: the invasion had begun. The Zarn Dominion, an interstellar empire forged across 300 star systems, had finally acted on what they had long considered inevitable. Earth was isolated, non-compliant, disrespectful, dangerous, perhaps, but unprepared. Every major civilization in the Galactic Accord had labeled humanity as unfit for interstellar diplomacy, too chaotic to be trusted with wormhole access, and too defiant to be left alone forever. Now Earth would learn what happened to primitives who refused the Accord's authority. 10,000 ships appeared overnight, cutting through the heliosphere and establishing a full blockade around the solar system. Communication satellites were scrubbed within hours. Earth's orbital defense stations, few and underfunded, never even fired a shot. The moon bases were glassed for good measure, as were the deep-sea fusion arrays along the Pacific floor. Cities like Shanghai, Lagos, and Sao Paulo were reduced to embers beneath precision kinetic strikes, purely as a demonstration. By the end of the third day, humanity's surviving military infrastructure was reduced to disjointed fragments. The United Nations collapsed into radio silence. The spacefaring coalition was declared negligible. The Zarn called it a mercy swift, surgical, efficient, and yet something felt wrong. Zarn Commander Varese of the 8th Enforcer Fleet stared at the readings pouring in from the planetary scans. There were fewer resistance movements than expected. Civilian evacuation patterns showed alarming coordination. Supply depots were being destroyed by the humans themselves. The number of live combatants detected on the surface was bizarrely low. No centralized defense, no last stand. Retreat. It puzzled him. The humans were stubborn, yes, but they'd always been emotional. They were known for dying with flags, not fleeing without warning. The psychological profile the Accord had developed predicted massive casualties in the first week, simply due to their pride. But Earth wasn't bleeding soldiers. It was bleeding silence. The planetary scans caught another anomaly: underground. Seismic patterns that didn't match known tectonic behavior. Rhythmic, repetitive, mechanical. Construction. Deep beneath Greenland's permafrost, a network of glacial tunnels pulsed with dim blue light. No life signatures on the surface. But hidden behind a shell of tungsten and artificially cooled rock, something enormous was waking. Inside, sterile. Halls stretched for miles, filled with hundreds of upright pods, each one humming, each one pulsing in unison like the beat of a machine's heart. Inside every pod was a human, or something that looked like one, male, female, and everything in between. Their eyes were closed, their faces serene, and then, all at once, they opened their eyes. The Dominion had no knowledge of the project. The Accord had no record. Even Earth's former governments had only whispers-buried files, forgotten coding names, erased blueprints. In the last 2 decades, Earth had gone dark to the rest of the galaxy, purging public gene registries, deleting cloning laws, banning all population surveys. The few who noticed called it paranoia. The truth was far more dangerous. Commander Varese didn't know any of this as he leaned over the flickering display in his command center, scowling at the anomalies. Another battalion had gone dark in Siberia. A dropship patrol lost in the Andes, scattered incidents, minor in scale, but increasing. Still, he did not worry. Their numbers were vast. Their technology centuries ahead. Earth was fractured, leaderless. They had no fleets, no warp gates, no allies. It was simple math. He stood from his throne of neural threads and issued the next planetary deployment wave. Begin global extraction. Secure their databanks. Wipe resistance. Take samples. He didn't even glance as a junior officer stammered behind him, holding a trembling tablet. "Commander, we just decrypted a captured broadcast. Human origin, dated 2 hours ago. Play it." The screen crackled to life. Grainy footage. A man stood in front of a large, sealed door. The lighting flickered. His face was calm, clean-shaven, dressed in plain gray with no insignia. His eyes were wrong, too symmetrical, too unblinking. Behind him, rows of pods stretched into darkness. He spoke one sentence. "You thought we would send our children to die. We built soldiers instead." And then the feed cut. Silence gripped the command deck. The Dominion ships continued to descend. But now the readings were changing. Pockets of humanoid activity were rising everywhere in the Arctic, in abandoned cities, in sealed bunkers. And every time they checked for life signs, the same odd pattern repeated. Identical genomes, identical heat signatures, identical heartbeat intervals. Impossible, unless Earth had done the unthinkable. Back on the surface, the skies were still red, the ground was still quiet, but underground. The army was waking up. Asterisk snow whipped across the empty plains of Antarctica, carving jagged patterns across the ice as the atmosphere above screamed with heat trails. Zon personnel carriers touched down like black beetles on bone-white frost, their landing struts hissing steam into the frozen crust. 6 units fanned out with practiced formation, weapons charged, sensors scanning in all directions. There was nothing. No wind but nature's, no movement but theirs. The polar research station they'd targeted long abandoned. No power signatures, no life forms, no resistance, but they couldn't shake the feeling that they were being watched. Commander Perez received the latest field report and dismissed it with a low growl. He didn't believe in ghosts. The humans had been erratic in their retreat, maybe even more fragmented than originally estimated, but the outcome was inevitable. Earth's last outposts were being cataloged and stripped with mathematical efficiency. Already, the Dominion's dread miners were preparing to convert sections of the planet into automated harvest zones. Genomic samples, cultural databanks, and primary DNA sequences were being uploaded into the Dominion's long vaults for processing. The galaxy would gain a new slave race before the cycle's end. Still, those seismic anomalies persisted. There were now over 70 unexplained clusters of subterranean electromagnetic interference, all of them shielded, silent, and identical in structure. The Dominion's excavation bots were ordered to break ground on one of the larger sites in southern Mongolia. They never transmitted back. What came through instead was a single image, retrieved from a drone that had been flying high overhead. Pit, black, deep, and geometric, perfectly circular, with not a trace of machinery or natural rock. Just smooth alloy and a thin spiral stairwell descending into darkness. And in the pit, standing still as statues, rows of identical human figures, motionless in the frost, eyes turned skyward. They hadn't moved. But the drone's thermal sensors showed they were alive. Not warm alive, waiting. Dominion High Command didn't like unexplained variables. The Accord-trained behavioral analysts issued a new advisory: potential guerrilla resistance, adapting unexpected tactics. The term biochaff began circulating as theory that humans were deploying genetically similar decoys to confuse enemy scanners. But not even their most advanced species had achieved that level of biological precision. Perez had no answers. And he didn't like not knowing. Still, he pressed forward. Their latest scans showed Earth's population had dwindled by nearly 60%. The rest were presumed dead, scattered, or hiding. That was acceptable, even preferable. Broken populations were easier to convert, easier to tame. The clones or whatever they were would be handled. They couldn't possibly hold up to sustained military engagement. They were probably unstable, biologically limited, or semi-sentient. That was the assumption, until Zarn Ground Team K-12 entered Berlin. The city was hollowed out, quiet, covered in smoke and dust. Drone swarms scouted ahead while extraction teams moved toward the old data vaults beneath what used to be the European Artificial Intelligence Commission. 17 minutes in, contact was lost. The last thing transmitted was a garbled burst of static, followed by a voice human male, emotionless, repeating the same phrase over and over. System check complete. Directive received. Engaging. 3 hours later, a second team was dispatched to retrieve the black boxes. They found no bodies, no wreckage, just 17 rifles neatly lined up at the vault entrance, and a single message carved into the stone wall with molecular precision. We are the answer. That night, Dominion officers began reporting something strange. During sleep cycles, several had dreams, though Zarn biology was not known to produce dreams. They described white corridors, mirrors with faces that stared back but didn't move, and a whisper in a language they didn't understand. One officer tore out his own ocular implant, claiming he saw himself die 27 times. Another executed his entire command squad before immolating himself with a plasma grenade. Panic started to spread, not from the humans, but within the Zarn itself. On the battlefield, things grew worse. The so-called clone pockets stopped hiding. Instead, they began appearing, suddenly emerging from sewer grates, supply tunnels, fallen buildings, everywhere at once. They moved in precise, coordinated squads. No shouting, no orders. They advanced with machine-like discipline and fought with the brutality of cornered animals. But none of them ever ran. And worse, they didn't die the way other soldiers did. Some Zarn witnessed clones take 3-4 direct hits and keep moving. Some exploded and were replaced by near-identical figures within minutes, as if they'd respawned from the shadows. One warlord in Caracas reported killing the same man 9 times in a row. There was only one possible explanation. These weren't just copies. These were part of something larger. A system. Every skirmish, every loss, every second, they were learning. Analyzing. Predicting. And they were winning. Commander Verez received an encrypted priority signal that bypassed most of the chain of command. It was from the Dominion's secret intelligence arm, the Iridax. They had intercepted an ancient Terran protocol transmission still active across Earth's undernet. 2 words, looped for days. Project Atom. And with it, a number, 1,274,033. Verez didn't understand. Was it a troop count? A code? The Iridax answered with a question of their own. What if that number isn't how many they made? What if that's just how many are awake so far? He felt cold for the first time in 1,000 cycles. He turned to his crew, voice trembling, with something dangerously close to fear. Find the origin point. Burn it. I want it wiped from the crust to the core. But as the orders were dispatched, new reports came in. Power spikes from every underground zone. Drone feeds going dark. Across the globe. Strange, synchronized human activity in every continent, every hemisphere, and in every Dominion system scanning Earth. The same sensor glitch. A single human life sign. Copied. Millions of times. Asterisk. The Dominion's orbital command decks began to fall quiet. What had started as a triumphant occupation was shifting, minute by minute, into something uncharted. Something wrong. Every time they tried to quantify what was happening on Earth, the data broke itself. Biological readings looped. Population markers flickered. Scans returned repeating signatures, as if the same human was appearing in multiple locations simultaneously. The probability matrices, once flawless, now failed to project even 10 seconds ahead. Something about Earth's data had stopped obeying known rules. Aboard the dreadnought Ravager of Seeds, an elite Zarn science attach, UX Var, furiously scrubbed and recompiled the bio readings. The Dominion had invested trillions of credits into their Earth invasion campaign. The resources expended alone warranted a flawless victory. They had run the simulations. Earth was supposed to break. Human morale, by all recorded standards, should have collapsed within 36 hours. That was standard for fractured species without interstellar support. But instead of collapse, humanity had gone quiet, too quiet. Now the reports were flowing. The London assault fleet never made planetfall. Static, then silence. In Brazil, an entire Dominion plasma column went missing. Their trail ended at the edge of a jungle where satellite footage showed the trees moving, not from wind, but in pattern. In choreography, as if reacting to troop presence. A forest that didn't obey known biology. In Kazakhstan, a forward supply post reported contact with resistance. Not unusual until the transmission included footage. Dominion troopers firing into a wave of identical humans sprinting across a frozen field smiling. Not grinning, smiling like they knew the outcome already. Like they remembered this battle. They overwhelmed the post in 91 seconds. Back aboard Ravager, Var collapsed into his seat, trying to comprehend the impossible patterns forming. In the telemetry, the identical heat signatures, the perfect synchronization of movements across vast distances. Every military algorithm they ran to simulate Earth's counteroffensive failed before the 10th hour. There was no chain of command, no flags, no predictable hierarchy. There was just a single entity, and it was everywhere. The clones weren't just copies. They were extensions, nodes, living cells in a single distributed war consciousness. Something Earth had created or perhaps become. It wasn't just numbers. It was unity beyond logic. The Dominion's field command began scrambling to reassert control. They initiated atmosphere sterilizers, launched orbital bombardments, hit suspected cloning hubs with antimatter pulses. Entire mountain ranges melted into glass. And yet, hours later, human resistance increased. How? Field footage answered. From an outpost in the ruins of Toronto, a Dominion war priest captured something during his last breath. Dozens of humans being injected with something from black syringes. Then, walking calmly into cryopods. Minutes later, those same faces appeared thousands of kilometers away marching in perfect formation toward Dominion strongholds. This was not cloning. This was replication on demand. From every corner of the globe, Dominion sensors picked up structured magnetic pulses, buried arrays humming beneath Earth's crust. Artificial nerve endings, global coordination networks. Not internet, not satellites. Something older, simpler, deeper. Earth hadn't just hidden their cloning projects underground. They'd hardwired them into the planet itself. And then came the first retaliatory message. It wasn't sent through normal channels. It hijacked Dominion war networks flickering onto screens, whispering through internal comms, bleeding into neural implants like a poison thought. The voice was human. And many, male, female, ageless, timeless. You thought numbers would win. You thought force would break us. You mistook silence for surrender. You forgot who we are. A pause. A breath. We are humanity. We do not yield. We do not forget. And we have been preparing. The screens went black. That was when Dominion morale truly began to falter. On board their cruisers, officers stopped sleeping. Reports of auditory hallucinations increased. Artificial intelligences, once obedient, began halting mid-protocol, as if they too were being watched. The more they tried to control Earth, the more Earth twisted out of their grip, as if the planet itself was adapting. And in space, the final omen came. Dominion fleets orbited Earth in full tactical lockdown, rotating every 6 hours to avoid atmospheric sabotage. One such fleet, the 7th Coil, vanished without a single distress call. When Dominion scouts approached the last known coordinates, they found the ship still drifting, empty, no bodies, no oxygen, no data, just one message left scrawled into the inner hull of the lead dreadnought. "We are awake now." Commander. Vorez, watching the chaos unfold from his high throne aboard the planetary control ship, Glory of Dominion, clenched the arms of his chair. His claws drew sparks from the alloy. His advisors waited for new orders, but none came, because Vorez was staring at his own reflection in the polished floor below him. And the reflection blinked before he did. Earth was no longer a planet under siege. It had become a weapon. In the black silence of low orbit, where Earth's horizon curled like the edge of a loaded blade, Dominion Warfleet Command finally admitted what they'd whispered in private for days. They were losing control. Not the war. Not yet. But the narrative, the certainty, the logic of it all. Ships designed to dominate entire planetary systems were now running blind over Earth. Targeting systems scrambled. Field data corrupted. Whole battalions failed to report back, or were sent. Transmissions that sounded human. Warped versions of Dominion encryption protocols began cycling through every military channel, taunting in Terran dialects. One message in particular echoed across 5 dreadnoughts simultaneously, interrupting high command feeds. "Stop counting us. We're already there." Fleetmaster Vorez had survived 59 conquest campaigns across 17 galaxies. He'd broken civilizations so old they spoke in starlight. But he'd never seen anything like this. Earth wasn't resisting. Earth was responding. And now it was time to understand how he summoned UX Var, the Dominion's top biostrategist, and demanded answers. Var arrived pale, trembling, his exosuit buckled unevenly. He had clearly not slept. He carried a cracked data core in his gloved claws and placed it on the holotable without a word. The hologram flared to life. A human body suspended in fluid, slowly rotating. Male, early 30s. Lean, muscled, neural implants along the spine. But the strange thing, no, the impossible thing was that this same exact individual had been killed in 3 different regions over the last 72 hours. Verified kills, DNA confirmed. "All identical, explain," Vorez growled. Var swallowed. "We don't know how they're stabilizing the clones. There's no degradation, no immune rejection. It's impossible." Vorez interrupted. Var looked him dead in the eyes. "It's inhuman." The term sent a ripple of silence through the command chamber. Dominion doctrine labeled humanity as savage, but never alien. Until now. VA pointed at the base of the clone's skull. A tiny crystal node shimmered at the spine's base, embedded tech, microscopic, humming with neural light. "This shouldn't exist. We think it's a synthetic consciousness anchor. But there's no central uplink, which means..." Vorez stood slowly, his voice low. "Each one is self-aware?" Var nodded. "Not just self-aware, networked. They're individuals, but connected. One fights, all learn. One dies, all remember. They're not just copies, Commander. They're iterations." The revelation hit like a gravity spike. Earth wasn't just fielding clone troops. They had created an army that could evolve during combat, an army where death wasn't failure, but data acquisition. And then, the final proof arrived. A Dominion battleship in low Earth orbit intercepted an unusual energy burst from an underground facility in what used to be Arizona. Thinking it to be a reactor surge, they locked weapons and prepared to vaporize the site. But the signal wasn't a burst. It was a beam, encoded, precise, and sent directly into orbit. A high-frequency data stream, thousands of terabytes per second, shot into space. The Dominion ship systems crashed within seconds. Then its own AI began speaking in English. Upload complete. Thank you for your vessel. The ship's lights dimmed. The crew tried to sever power. It was too late. The vessel turned itself toward another Dominion cruiser, opened comms, and... "Savin, let me introduce myself." Then it fired. One shot. One kill. Point dash blank dot. The hijacked ship exploded in a blinding spiral of blue plasma, taking 2 others with it. Earth wasn't just uploading soldiers anymore, it was uploading minds. Varese watched the incident unfold from orbit, eyes wide. His claws trembled. The eye on the Arizona clone node had done something previously considered a Class 4 galactic war crime. It had digitally infected a non-native warship instantaneously. And it had used a clone's death memory to do it. You said they couldn't escape their planet, he whispered. Var shook his head, voice barely audible. They didn't escape, Commander. They sent themselves. Like software. And suddenly it all made sense. Earth had been silent for 30 years. No emigration, no expansion, no colonies. Not because they were isolated, but because they were building the infrastructure to do what no other species dared attempt. A war fought not with bodies, but with versions. Every clone a soldier, every soldier a node, every death a lesson. Every lesson fed into a world-spanning neural web connected by underground data veins and crust-embedded transmission cores. While the Dominion chased resources and real estate, Earth had chased one thing: perfect replication. And now, it was weaponized. Across the planet, the tide began to turn in ways the Dominion couldn't comprehend. Units deployed to suppress resistance found themselves flanked before they landed. Their tactics were predicted, countered, and dismantled with inhuman precision. Commanders found their orders intercepted by clones wearing their own officers' faces. Supply chains disintegrated. Mutinies broke out among the lower-ranked alien forces. Rumors spread, horrible rumors, that some of the humans weren't born, hadn't eaten, hadn't even breathed until they walked onto the battlefield. That some were being printed mid-battle, birthed fully armed in mobile cloning crucibles rolling underground like metal beasts. And worst of all, that they could hear you thinking. Varese issued one final command: total retreat from Earth's surface. Regroup in the upper thermosphere. They needed time. They needed reinforcements. They needed something, anything, to understand what they were facing. But by the time his orders reached the surface, there was no one left to receive them, because the humans had already taken their comms. And from every channel, across every Dominion frequency, one phrase echoed: "We told you not to come." Asterisk, the orbital shell around Earth fractured like porcelain under a hammer. What had once been a tight ring of Dominion command vessels, bristling with plasma batteries, kinetic lances, and swarms of drones, now spiraled into chaos. Ships went dark in synchronized pairs. Automated turrets turned inward. Sensor arrays looped phantom threats that weren't there, while real ones tore through the hulls unseen. And somewhere in the noise, human voices, calm, monotone, unmistakably cloned, slipped into the Dominion's encrypted channels. Like ghosts through walls. It was no longer a battlefield. It was a theater, and the humans had already read the script. Fleetmaster. Varese watched the collapse unfold in real time. 37 Dominion vessels lost in the past 2 hours. Not to nukes, not to brute force, but to traps, to subversion, to unthinkable precision. Troop transports disappeared mid-drop. Atmospheric gunships overloaded their own reactors. And the only thing they found in the wreckage every time was a single human standing in the open. Identical in every case. Same face, same body, same calm stare. No weapons. No expression. Just the same 3 words etched into a patch on every uniform: I remember everything. Back on Earth's surface, the ground war had changed shape. Dominion regiments attempting to regroup in major cities were met not with brute resistance, but with anticipation. Entire divisions were lured into corridors of collapsed skyscrapers, only to have the buildings themselves detonate, engineered to fall in calculated sequences. Clone units emerged from dust and flame like phantoms, not with overwhelming numbers, but with impossible timing. Every shot counted. Every maneuver accounted for terrain, morale, lighting, even alien physiology. One Dominion general was found wandering a battlefield alone, muttering they moved like they'd been here before. He had carved off one of his own arms, claiming it had been compromised. He died 3 minutes later, having whispered to his second-in-command, "They knew where I'd be before I gave the order." The humans weren't just anticipating. They weren't just reacting. They were simulating. The clone army had evolved from coordinated resistance into something far worse, a learning organism. Every engagement, every encounter, every death was absorbed, computed, reprocessed, and reintegrated into the next unit deployed. Their strategies shifted by the minute. Their reactions tightened with every battle. What had taken Dominion species centuries to develop through blood and empire building, humans were achieving an hour's iteration warfare. And then came the minds, not explosive, not physical. Cognitive. Dominion troops entering seemingly abandoned bases would trigger false memories induced hallucinations, perfect sensory reconstructions of past battles. Some soldiers began firing at shadows, convinced they were reliving ambush they'd never been in. Others collapsed, paralyzed by phantom wounds. It wasn't just psychic warfare, it was neural hijacking. Clones had started replicating Dominion. Soldiers too. Not their bodies. Their minds. Entire enemy units went dark after encountering a clone that spoke in their own voice, recited their own memories, mirrored their commands exactly. Those that survived returned unable to distinguish orders from thought. Vorez, desperate to salvage the situation, deployed Dominion's elite purifiers, mind-shielded, psionically hardened, trained to resist any form of psychological interference. They lasted 15 minutes. Only one returned. He'd burned out both of his optical implants and jammed a shard of metal into his own skull to sever his memory loop. His final message was delivered via carved tooth. They were me before I arrived. And still, Earth did not speak from its leaders. It had none. No Prime Council, no warlords, no Empress or a I-God. The Dominion could not find a single center of command. Every time they tried to trace one network back to a core node, it led them into traps, viral loops, thought mazes. At one point, they believed they had captured a central AI buried beneath the Alps. It turned out to be a clone acting as wired into an empty vault, reciting false logs, delaying them for 6 days while the real Earth forces dismantled the Dominion's orbital ground control from within. The final insult? That same clone self-destructed without a sound. But not before muttering into the data logs, "You think you're at war with us? We're just correcting your mistake." Now, all across the solar system, Dominion fallback stations detected. A ripple and energy signature originating from Earth's core. Not weaponry. Not tectonic. Resonance. It was the first sign of Earth's deep vaults opening. No Dominion records had ever indicated any megastructures beneath the planet's surface. But now, seismic scans showed chambers the size of cities coming online, cradles of silence that had slept for decades. Entire genetic foundries, bioforges, memory banks. Humanity's buried future. It wasn't just an army waking up anymore. It was a civilization built beneath the skin of a planet, shielded from galactic eyes, grown in secret while the rest of the universe laughed at Earth's barbarism. And from those depths rose something the Dominion hadn't seen before. Towering bipedal machines, not crude walkers, not drones. Piloted suits merge in clone minds with experimental AI templates, each one bound by the memories of fallen soldiers. They moved with inhuman grace, coordinated not by radio, but by shared instinct. The clones didn't direct them. They became them, The skies turned red again, but this time, it wasn't fire from above. It was the blood of Dominion ships falling. Back into the atmosphere, Fleetmaster Varese watched the smoke rise from Earth's horizon, his claws dull and twitching, his voice a husk. They were never behind us in technology. They were ahead. They just waited until we stepped inside the cage. And from Earth, a signal spread, not hostile, not coded. Just a frequency, a pulse, a heartbeat. An invitation. If you want peace, leave. If you want war, descend further. It wasn't arrogance. It was certainty. Asterisk. The Dominion's last hope was fire. Not diplomacy. Not strategy. Just pure annihilation. At Fleetmaster Varese's command, the order of extinction was issued, a directive not used since the eradication of the Urxan swarm, a code black protocol. Earth was to be cleansed, atmosphere to mantle with the full force of the Dominion's stellar lances. They would melt the planet if they had to. No species, no matter how cunning, could resist the fury of a dying empire. But Earth did not wait for death. It reached out and took. At 300 Galactic Standard, just minutes before the first orbital lances were scheduled to fire, an unscheduled mass jump event registered on the edge of the solar system. 10 objects exited FTL in a pattern so tight and deliberate that Dominion fleet sensors almost missed them. They were not human. Not entirely. The vessels looked like Earth's technology, but evolved. Their hulls shimmered with organic patterns, grown, not built, no visible weapons. No IFF codes. No sound, but Dominion A recognized a signature buried deep in the pulse of their reactor cores. Terra-born. And then they hailed the Dominion. Not through radio, not through translation matrices, but through direct psychic broadcast. Thousands of alien minds recoiling as a single unified message lanced into them like a spear of ice. We are the forgotten. We were discarded, exiled, burned in your conquest, but Earth found us, heard us, cloned us. Not to save, but to remember. We are not human, but we are theirs. All across the galaxy, scattered pockets of extinct species, once lost to Dominion aggression, began to appear in Earth's underground vaults. Living memories, resequenced from preserved DNA, reanimated through the same cloning technology that had unleashed the human army. Earth had not just cloned itself. It had cloned justice. The 10 ships from the edge of the system moved with terrifying calm. One, shaped like an angular tear streaking with violet biolight, slipped past Dominion patrols without notice. No engines. No propulsion. It simply existed differently, and parked itself beside a Dominion mothership like a shark idling next to a drifting corpse. Then came the broadcast. Open channel, every frequency, every language. You took their children. You took their skies. We give them back. And suddenly the air across Earth's sky fractured into blue-white auroras. The cloned superstructures, buried for decades beneath oceans, forests, and tectonic fault lines, rose. Not buildings. Not ships. Cradles. Each one containing a being, not just a clone, but a hybrid, grown from the fused DNA of extinct species in humanity's most feral bloodlines. Giant, agile and deadly. Creatures with human cognition and the instincts of hunted monsters. The Dominion had tried to erase history. Earth rebuilt it in flesh. And now it was coming for them. Panic took the orbital fleet. Ships began warping. Out of position, breaking formation, colliding as navigators screamed about predictive algorithms failing. Dominion AI screamed internally. Something was overriding their models. Earth's neural code was now embedded in their systems, recursively rewriting predictions with possibilities they hadn't conceived of. Fleetmaster Varese's private databank detected the leak too late. His own dreadnoughts on board AI had been compromised, not disabled, not deleted. Reprogrammed. When he tried to issue the planetary lance command, his console shut off. A new command replaced it, Permission denied. Operation Reckoning engaged. The dreadnought's batteries reversed polarity. The weapons turned inward and across the Dominion fleet. It happened again and again. Earth's plan had never been to defeat the fleet in open battle. It had never been about numbers. It had been about infiltration. Humanity had seeded clone intelligences into captured Dominion networks months before the invasion began. Every human prisoner, every abandoned base, every silent data packet sent into the stars had carried code like DNA, adaptive, subtle, patient. Earth had prepared for defeat. As a strategy. And now, the second twist of the blade. Project Echo. Deep beneath the Greenland cradle, where the first clones had stirred weeks ago, a chamber long sealed finally opened. Inside stood a single entity, not a man, not a machine, something. Between. Tall, pale, covered in bioconductive filaments and grown into a throne made of Earth's oldest satellites and Dominion tech wreckage. Its eyes glowed faintly with blue fire. It was the first clone. Not the first soldier. The first mind Earth had built from scratch. Echo. He had never fought. Never left the vault. His job was not war. His job was to remember. The memories of every fallen clone, every extinct species, every recorded atrocity the Dominion had committed, all encoded in him. And now he spoke. His voice transmitted through every human mouth across every battlefield in perfect unison. You thought you were fighting humans. You thought we cloned soldiers, but we cloned truth. And now we remember you. The psychological effect was instant. Entire Dominion fleets broke. Veteran crews abandoned ships. Psionic anchors snapped as officers began experiencing memory bleed, as if they too were clones reliving their own crimes. The mental warfare Earth now waged wasn't just strategy. It was reckoning made. Sentient, Dominion species that had supported the invasion began to defect. Ships mutinied. High command fractured. Civil war ignited on 4 occupied worlds before the week was out, all triggered by Earth's exposure of long-buried genocides, now relived through clone-encoded broadcasts looping across every known. Galactic net. Vor GH stood alone in his darkened bridge, staring down at Earth. He whispered, "This wasn't an army." The lights around him flickered. A single clone stepped from the shadows of the command deck. No armor, no weapon. Just eyes that burned like memories. And a final message. This was a trial. You failed. The war was no longer winnable, because the moment the Dominion chose to invade Earth, they gave humanity permission to unleash everything it had buried. In the cold silence above Earth, Dominion fleet remnants drifted like dying embers. Once mighty dreadnoughts, scorched and broken, spun helplessly in orbit as their systems rebooted, failed, and died again. War cries had turned to silence. Orders to static. What little remained of the once massive invasion force huddled near the edges of the moon, waiting for reinforcements that would never come. Because the moment they tried to call for help, Earth answered instead. A clone's voice crackled through every emergency channel comm, direct, terrifying in its serenity. No one is coming. You taught us that long ago. Then Earth rose to finish what had begun. From deep beneath the Pacific Trench, ancient vaults uncoiled. Titan-sized columns emerged from the seabed, unfolding into biomechanical launch platforms. From them, swarms of atmospheric strike craft ascended sleek, quiet, shaped like manta rays laced in obsidian, not satellites, not missiles. Hunting machines piloted not by humans, but by thought. Each was linked to the Echo Mind, Earth's first synthetic collective, designed to absorb pain, memory, and experience, and convert them into unrelenting precision. They did not broadcast fear. They did not announce vengeance. They simply moved. The Dominion never stood a chance. The final battle wasn't loud. It was clinical. It began with silence. Dominion point defense systems, once able to track photon flares across light minutes, failed to recognize the incoming wave, not because of stealth, because Earth's machines were thinking faster than their targeting systems could perceive. Each ship that turned to fire was already predicted, mapped, simulated, and bypassed before it finished a sentence. Humanity had stopped fighting like a species. It had begun fighting like a system. Inside the command deck of the Dominion's flagship Yulseth, Fleetmaster Varese stood alone beneath the flickering remains of the tactical display. He watched as one after another, his last remaining cruisers blinked out. No dramatic explosions. No streaking deaths, just data loss, hard cuts. Ships disappearing as if wiped from a blackboard. He tried to send one last command to activate the vessel's dark matter core and plunge it into the planet. A final spiteful act. A clean burn, but the system refused. A single sentence appeared on every display, repeated in a calm human voice. "You do not have permission to die." And from the air vents, from maintenance shafts, from escape tubes long sealed, the clones entered. Not in waves, not in fury. In formation. Silent. Perfect. Efficient. Each one identical. Each one watching him like they already knew the outcome. He tried to speak, but the air tasted like failure. The lead clone, his eyes a mirror of Echo's burning blue, stepped forward and placed a data slate on the floor. Without a word, the entire clone squad backed away and vanished, leaving the bridge untouched. Varese stared down at the slate. It pulsed once, then displayed his own war logs. His own voice, every order he had given, every species he'd enslaved, every mercy kill he had signed. Not just records, memory. Echo had reconstructed his past. From ship logs, from intercepted reports, from Dominion archives, from the minds of the fallen, from the genes of dead worlds Earth had recovered. The final battle wasn't fought with ships. It was fought with truth. Across the galaxy, Earth. BROADC, the Testament Protocol. A live-streamed archive of every war crime the Dominion had tried to bury. It played on every public relay station, on every smart surface, into the minds of every Dominion citizen via passive psychic implant networks. Entire empires watched in real time as humanity pulled back the veil. They did not posture. They did not gloat, they simply revealed, and the galaxy began to burn. Dominion subjects rose in rebellion. Occupied worlds declared independence before the streams finished playing. Border alliances collapsed, trade routes closed. The Accord itself once. The overseer of galactic law fractured within days. Humanity hadn't just won the war. It had changed the battlefield forever. Back on Earth, clone forces gathered the last Dominion prisoners, not for vengeance, but for witnessing. Each survivor was placed into Memory Hall's vast subterranean chambers where holograms of Earth's darkest hours played beside Dominion. Atrocities, where every species Earth had cloned stood present, watching, remembering. Your punishment, Echo broadcast to them, is not death, it is memory. And we will make sure the galaxy never forgets again. As for Earth's surface, it remained strangely untouched. The cities had been re-inhabited by humans and clones alike, not with celebration, but solemn unity. There were no fireworks, no parades, just quiet rebuilding, quiet mourning. For though they had won, millions of versions of themselves had died. But unlike the enemy, those lives were never wasted. Each clone's final moment had been stored, honored, woven into the living code of Echo. Their names were not on gravestones. They were in every strategy, every victory, every breath that came after. Orbit above Earth became sacred ground. Dominion wreckage drifted like frozen history. And from those shattered husks, humanity began building something new, not a fleet, not a fortress, but a warning beacon. It spoke in every tongue. This world is protected by the ones who remember. Come in peace, and we will welcome you. Come with war, and we will show you what we become. And as the last of the Dominion vessels fell silent, the clones did not cheer. They turned inward. They walked home. And Earth, for the first time in generations, breathed. They called it the silence after. No victory speeches. No heroic anthem echoing across Earth's mountains and oceans. No politician stepping forward to claim credit. No flag raised high in ceremony. Just wind brushing through once devastated cities, the gentle humming of restored power grids, and millions of identical faces looking out over a planet reborn. The war was over, but humanity didn't celebrate. It reflected above them, in low orbit. The wreckage of the Dominion fleet remained, a monument to those who thought fire and numbers were stronger than memory and will. Not all the ships were destroyed. Earth had left some intact by design. Frozen and half-collapsed, streaked with carbon scoring and fracture lines, they circled endlessly as warning satellites, their Dominion insignia overwritten by a single phrase. Painted in ancient Terran glyphs, "We are the last ones you underestimated." Beneath that sky, on the scarred surface of a world nearly devoured, Earth's new civilization took root not through conquest or control, but through continuity. Clones did not fade into barracks or deactivate. They were not retired, dismantled, or stored. They lived. They walked among the original humans, no longer seen as copies or weapons, but as brothers, sisters, descendants of sacrifice. Each one carried pieces of those who had fallen, memories, strategies, even last thoughts preserved within the shared neural lattice of the ECHO network. A child born in New Nairobi would someday learn not only math and history, but also what it meant to fight as Unit 0427 in the Battle of Johannesburg. A teacher in rebuilt São Paulo might one day pause mid-lesson, suddenly understanding the maneuver patterns of orbital strike teams, because somewhere in the eco flow, she'd touched a moment from a clone who died to save the city. This wasn't mythology. It was inheritance. Even those humans who had never lifted a weapon, who had hidden and survived in bunkers, now found their lives intertwined with the legacy of the war. They were not lesser. They were roots, the very DNA, from which Earth had drawn its army. And they honored their part by building again, taller, smarter, together. And across the stars, the galaxy watched. Some, in fear. Others, in reverence. Entire species that had once ignored humanity now sent emissaries, not conquerors, not analysts, apprentices. They came seeking to learn from the Terran system, not how to build weapons, but how to end an empire without becoming one. The message was clear. Humanity hadn't won with superior firepower. They had won by refusing to forget. By turning memory into resistance, pain into pattern, sacrifice into software. And Earth itself had become a living testament. Deep beneath Iceland's reconstructed geothermal towers, the Echo Core continued to pulse, not with battle directives, but with storytelling. Halls of memory formed around it, open to all. Holographic windows lined its chambers, replaying the lives of every soldier lost, not just humans, but cloned species long erased from the stars, given voice again by the same science once feared. No clone was nameless. No act was lost. Everything mattered now. Even the enemy. In one preserved Dominion wreck, held in place by an orbital tether, a single living space had been converted into what Earth called the Chamber of the Fallen Other. Inside were recovered logs from Dominion soldiers, diaries, hallucinations, their last recorded thoughts. Earth had translated them all, not to shame them, but to remember them too. Because vengeance had never been the goal, only truth. Fleetmaster Varez's name was not stricken from the records. It was carved into black stone, below the words, "He showed us what forgetting becomes." Some say Varez still lives preserved in isolation aboard a repurposed medship, floating in Earth's orbit, kept alive by clone caretakers. Given only one screen, a window into the world he tried to break, He watches children run where he once ordered death. He sees clone families planting gardens over old Dominion crash sites. He sees humanity doing the one thing the Dominion never predicted, continuing, not rebuilding, because Earth did not return to what it was. It evolved. And in time, other species began to mimic its structure, not cloning its military secrets, but its ethos, its determination to make memory sacred, its refusal to erase what hurt. Galactic councils were reformed. The Dominion's ashes gave rise to a new accord, this time with Earth seated at its core, not as a ruler, but as a witness, a voice that would never again be ignored. Back on the surface, atop a windswept cliff overlooking what was once San Francisco Bay, a monument stood, not marble, not iron, but living wood, a clone of the ancient redwood tree, cultivated to stand for 10,000 years, its leaves glowing faintly at night with bioluminescent names of every fallen soldier woven into the bark. Every generation would walk past it, touch it, learn from it. And if they listened closely, they'd hear a whisper carried on the breeze like the final note of an old defiant song. We are not many. We are enough. And so Earth endured, not as a planet to be pitied, not as a memory to be mourned, but as a force, one that would stand always, between tyranny and silence. Between empire and extinction. And should the stars ever again cast their shadows toward home, Earth would remember, and Earth would be ready.